You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
From searching for a lost city in the jungles of Honduras to a business in college, producing travel films and a hit game show, globally scaled a tech firm that sold for 8 figures, and now he's going full circle to produce a TV series from a recently published book, The Reincarnation of Marie. So excited to have Henry Woodman here. He is the co-founder of Anemoia Media. So excited to chat with him. How are you today, Henry? Thanks for joining us.
Chris, I'm excellent. Thank you. That intro was very cool. This guy sounds like a badass, man. I'd like to meet him.
Isn't it crazy? We look back at our accomplishments and realize, wow, I guess we are pretty notable, pretty accomplished. This is so cool.
And there I was the whole time with imposter syndrome.
Isn't that crazy? I think we all suffer from that. Throughout the journey, we are just figuring things out as we go, and we don't realize how grateful and lucky we should be to be where we're at.
Absolutely. I tell people, born a white guy in the US in the 1960s, I mean, how badly could I screw that up? I mean, just a little bit of discipline and tenacity, I could probably make something of myself, but I didn't know that then. I just thought it was normal.
Absolutely. And we always like to welcome our entrepreneurs on to ask them about your entrepreneurial journey. What were you doing before, and how did that kind of lead you into what you're doing today?
So it's funny because I look back and I'm like kind of a hedonistic and opportunistic entrepreneur, meaning I just like to do things that I enjoy, or I find opportunities and I try to exploit them. So it started in college as a 19-year-old. I went to the University of Arizona in Tucson. I'm sitting in a laundromat. I'm jonesing. I'm addicted at the time to Pac-Man, right? And this place needs a video game because I certainly wasn't going to crack the books and study. And I'm thinking, man, I got a pocket full of quarters and there's no video game. Instead of thinking somebody should do something, I went back to my dorm room. I called every laundromat in Tucson. It's the yellow pages, right? And I said, you guys have video games? And they all said no. And I started saying, well, no, would you like some? I'd share the revenue with you. A few said yes. And so that started, I went to an auction and bought these machines that the arcade places in the mall didn't want because they were not popular. And I'd buy them cheaper than they would cost. And I'd put them in a laundromat because I had a captive audience. So that was essentially the first sort of entrepreneurship. I built that up to where I would move machines around every couple of weeks. So they go, finally got rid of that crappy machine. Now they'll get another machine, right? And bought my car, drove to Los Angeles with dreams of getting into the film business. And first thing I do is I see an ad in the paper for a game show contestants. And I'm thinking, oh yeah. There's a game show that was just starting on CBS called Press Your Luck. So I sign up for it. I'm on the second show that airs. I make even more money, which was not a good thing for a young kid to get too much money because then you spend it partying and other addictions up your nose. We won't even go into that. So I'll continue rambling on unless you want to go deeper into any of those.
No, that's perfect. I do love that. I hear this from a lot of entrepreneurs. There was a need or an opportunity that they wanted to fulfill for themselves, and they realized they could turn that into a business or make that happen. So that's what you did. You found this opportunity to put video games in there, and it turned into something. And as you said, we kind of learn financial literacy all throughout life. So it's not uncommon for us to find success and have to restart the cycle all over again and do it all over.
Yeah. And ironically, I did it for myself, but every time I'd go to a laundromat to collect the quarters or switch the machines, I couldn't play with my own machines because then I would be taking away from my profits. It's like, excuse me, can I get in here and just create the machine to play without paying for it? Yes. So I never got to play my machines, which was kind of the odd duck about it. It was a need that I had, and I figured other people would have it as well.
Absolutely. It's great advice not to get high on your own supply. And that even includes Pac-Man. Very, very important.
Yeah.
So then I'm most interested in this bootstrap tech startup that you sold for 8 million. What was this? Can you tell us anything about that? What that experience was like?
Yeah, it was actually more than 8. It was 8 figures I put in there, but this is what happened. So I was producing travel films in the late 80s and early 90s. Pinochet in Chile went, and the country in Chile went from a dictator to a democracy. And I thought, ooh, they need content, right? They're adding television stations and a new network. I fly down there, I promote myself as this American producer. I produce a game show. While I'm in Chile, they're showing me this nonlinear edit stuff, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. Then somebody hands me a CD-ROM and shows me this 360-degree virtual tour where you can look up and down and all around. And I thought, I don't have to travel with 5 guys and 17 pieces of luggage. Bring it on, right? So I built a business to do virtual tours for the travel industry. It's called World Travel Vision. And while I'm doing that, eventually the hotels and the destinations, because I'd give them a CD-ROM, they'd take it to the trade shows and the conferences. They said, how do we put this stuff on this new World Wide Web thingy? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm not a tech guy. Send them a CD-ROM. And they said, yeah, they don't know what to do with it. There are no standards. I'm like, all right, let me see what I can do to help. So I hired somebody to create these links and what we call digital brochures, where we would produce the 360s, give a link to the Expedias and Liberty Travels of the world, and they would post it and show the 360s of the hotels. And then eventually, as we're looking into this, and this is where opportunity presents itself, I realized that those old legacy systems that gave you the rate and the availability when you would go to a brick and mortar travel agency, they didn't have pictures, right? So I'm delivering virtual tours, which is nice to have, but the need to have are the photos. And there's some dysfunction there because those old systems didn't have the capacity for photos. They could tell you what the cost, what the rate was, and if it was available on that date, but no pictures, cryptic text at best, right? So I thought, okay, so any kid with a camera and a computer becomes a competitor. That's going to be a race to the bottom. I build a little bit of a moat with the virtual tour distribution, but the real need is photos, right? So I'd end up after a while, pivot to distributing photos, right? Now it was a long gestation of like 25 years before I could get all these places connected and get tens of thousands of hotels to use the service. But now if you go to any travel website, and I mean any travel site on the planet, and you see pictures of the hotels like Wyndham's, Hyatt's, Hilton's, those will have come from my old company. And that was the SaaS business, which is a great business because it's an ongoing concern. We would have over 60,000 hotels and each one paying every month. Well, they wouldn't pay us. They'd pay the corporate office. The corporate office would pay us. So it was an even better business and enterprise level. And that was sort of the long goal. The moat is incredibly deep because you could go to Wyndham, for example, the world's largest hotel group, and you say, listen, I have this great technology, size, tag, categorize. It'll do anything. And they go, great. Can you send it to Expedia? I'd go, well, I'm working on it. I'll get it there. Yeah. And what about booking and Despegar and Delico? Well, that'll take me years. Okay. Call me when you get there. Because unless you can distribute the content everywhere, you're no good to me. And unless you have content, I'm not going to connect with you. So it was a slow evolution to having built that and got very lucky.
Wow. A lot of great challenges and opportunities just within that. I love that it just started with going somewhere for the game show and you find this 3D virtual tour. And then later on, you realize, okay, this is something I could create value in. And you even realize yourself the difference between nice to have and the need to have and distinguishing between the two. I'd like to dive deeper into that topic because we often need to sell the solution to a problem. It's like the need to have, but the want to have are often the shiny objects that often sell better. Sometimes I feel like for us, maybe like a social media agency, TikTok is the hot, flashy item that you just mentioned the word TikTok. And suddenly they're on it and they don't necessarily understand the end results or what it takes to get there. So I just want to understand more in your mind how you kind of come up with the problem solution, the need to have, want to have.
Yeah, I'd like to say it was that linear and simple and that I was that smart, but it's nothing close to the truth in the respect that when we started producing virtual tours and we'd give CD-ROMs and then we started distributing virtual tours, there was another company in Canada that was distributing videos to the travel site. So we were kind of complementary. We were thinking at one point we should combine forces. And there was one company in Europe that was doing the photos, right? So I thought, okay, let me partner with the photo distribution guys. They'll do the photos. Somebody wants virtual tours. We're their partner. We'll get that. And that will work out for us, right? Because they've already had connections with what's called the GDS, the global distribution systems, which were the big monsters, right? And so that's the way it went until the competitor that did the videos raised a ton of VC money, acquired our partner who did the photos, right? So we were left holding the bag going, oh my God, are we screwed? And one company that we were doing virtual tours for, that was Starwood, said, we like you guys. Can you do photos? And we lied and said yes. And so we kind of got into that. We would say, yeah, we'll distribute, but then we went to our competitor's free version to manually upload in order to do that. This happened. And then they realized that they had a monopoly. So we had one group, Starwood, for 5 years, but we knew there was an opportunity if the hotel groups weren't happy at the end of the 5 years when the exclusives ended. So we essentially called all the hotel groups. We went to conferences. We traded the photography services for a free booth at the conference and stuff like that. And so we would talk to the groups, the Hiltons, the Hyatts, and the Starwoods. I went way had Starwood. We would say, so how's it going? And we would try to get them to be honest. What's working? What's not working? What do you need? And since they were relatively a monopoly, they were kind of arrogant. They weren't innovating and they were raising prices. So people weren't happy. And we knew that. And when they'd say that to us, we'd say, listen, don't tell us, tell the GDSs. And when they release those exclusives, we will be ready. So after the 5 years, and by the way, a lot of suffering, we ended up going from 1,000 hotels that was Starwood to 22,000 overnight in less than a year. So there was need pent up, and we knew, and we built out the technology over 5 years to prepare for the possibility. I mean, it's really hard for a hotel group to say, listen, I'm going to retool my tech platform to connect with you as opposed to them. It's not easy, right? So there's got to be a lot of motivation. And we ended up going overnight and exploding. And then a couple of years later, a group came and said, we want to buy you. And of course, I had a number on my mirror for a decade. And I said, listen, I don't think I'm there yet because I need to have a bigger revenue number to get a larger EBITDA. And that will get me to my 5 to 8 times EBITDA, right? And they said, well, what's your number? And I told them the number. And they said, and I looked at them, I said, listen, you'll overpay today for something you'll underpay for tomorrow. I was making money. I had no boss. I had no board. I slept well at night. I was in a comfortable position. And so they looked at each other and they go, fine, you got a deal. It was 20 times EBITDA. Yeah. So I got lucky.
Lucky, but an incredible amount of risk and
Oh yeah.
dedication to still see this through. You were looking years ahead already at these expiring contracts and seeing that they were not happy. This was an opportunity, but like you said, you had to suffer this short-term sacrifice in order, hopefully, a long-term gain.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mortgaged the house, right? I had a line of credit to pay my employees. I went back to school to get my MBA in entrepreneurship because simply put, I didn't know what I was doing. Shows, TV and stuff is a beginning, middle, and an end, right? You sell it, pre-production, production, post-production. Here's your thing. Goodbye. Thank you. Have a good day. And this ongoing concern when people would say, listen, you got to hire the best people. I'm like, oh, I can't even afford to pay myself. I don't know what you're talking about. And it didn't mean that. Or they'd say, listen, you got your KPIs. I'm like, oh, what's a KPI? Right. Or what's the vision? I'm like, I don't know if I make money. Right. All of those things were foreign concepts to me. And I also was given a book, Gino Wickman's Traction, and it changed my life because that clarified some of those basic principles for building a foundation. So we were fortunate that we had 5 years. I went back, I got an education, I put a foundation that could easily scale. Had it not happened that way, I don't know if it would have turned out the way it did either, because people were frustrated and we were an option at the right time in the right place. But yeah, it was a roll of the dice.
Wow, absolutely incredible. And I think this is a recurring story throughout your entire entrepreneurial journey. Like you said, hedonistic, you're just seeing these opportunities and again, taking a chance. You went back to school, kind of similar for me. I was in business for 6, 7 years. I went back for my degree in business and marketing because I feel like we should be lifelong learners. We never know enough. There's always more to know. And as we kind of talked about before, suffering from imposter syndrome, we often don't look back at our accomplishments and what we do know already. But I think it's important that we continue to strive to learn and share that knowledge with others as well.
Without a doubt, is a couple of things. One, you got to learn, you got to know, right? And the other thing is you need to surround yourself with like-minded people. That saying that you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with. If I were hanging out with people that would punch a clock and go home and have a beer and sit on the couch and eat chips, then I probably would be doing the same thing, right? But the fact that I surrounded myself with groups that were young business owners or striving, it was motivational and inspirational and educational. How do you do it? What you do? And the patience part is almost the stupidity part where I didn't know what else I would do. Right. At that point, I'm like, I don't have a plan B, right? There is no option. I could see the writing on the wall that there was an opportunity, but I needed to sit there and suffer for many years to get to that point.
It is a lot of suffering. It's unfortunate. As we talked about earlier, we'll see some stupid people find really great success right off the bat. We have passionate, hardworking people who never seem to gain any traction, and it's unfortunate. But just as you said, this is something about finding opportunity. It's taking the risk. And I love what you mentioned about the networking aspect of it.
Yeah.
You're the average of the 5 people you
Yeah.
hang out with. It is so true. The motivation, inspiration, the education that comes from all of those things. It's been a big growth factor for my businesses as well. Gives me new ideas. And then we just understand more about how their mind works. And then we kind of imitate and replicate what they have going on in our own way, in our own version.
Yeah, without a doubt. And then about the opportunities, when you're looking around and you see something, you're like, okay, yeah, that looks good. Well, I'm doing virtual tours. Oh, yeah, virtual tour distribution. Okay, yeah, okay. You say yes to everything because as starting a business, you're a two-bit whore for any nickel, right? You got to say yes to whatever opportunities you can to pay the bills. But eventually, when you see, I think I can win at this one, or I think this one can turn into something, then you have to make the really difficult decision to say no to everything. Cause we eventually got rid of our photographers. We got rid of the virtual tour distribution and focused maniacally on the one thing. And that's really hard to do, right? Because you're essentially putting your eggs in the basket, but what you also don't want to dilute yourself to where somebody else is going to pass you by.
Yes, absolutely. I look back as you were mentioning that. That is so true for my business, starting with the DJing. I was doing any birthday, anniversary party, or fundraiser that I could. Eventually got to a point where we could turn down all of those and strictly focus on weddings. We found our niche and that really one thing that we do well. And eventually we started to scale that with the DJ team. And that was our ticket to
Exactly.
success. And same for the marketing agency too. It was $300, $400 clients that are now 1,500, 2,000. And I think just the numbers get bigger, the problems get more complex, but it's kind of like the same foundational principles of what we started with in our own businesses are just, they're just amplified. We're just
Yeah.
doing more of it.
Yeah. And don't be afraid as an entrepreneur to see if you need to pivot because it doesn't always, work. But a lot of it is discipline. Wash, rinse, repeat. Do it again. Wash, rinse, repeat. Do it again. And a lot of people in this day and age, they don't have the patience. They read that somebody struck it rich. They don't know the backstory of how they got there. Right. And people will say, well, you did really well. Yeah, I suffered for a decade or more. We 25 years in building this thing. So there were a lot of close calls where my next question to people would be, would you like fries with that burger? Right? You never know.
Absolutely. Oh, behind every entrepreneur, the one success that you see, you may not realize that there's 9 other failures or the obstacles that they really came into to get where they are today. So again, that sacrifice, that struggle that you're putting in, it's something that really hardens us. It strengthens us. But over time, entrepreneurship, unless you expand your circle, it can be a bit lonely. It feels dark to kind of have all these hats on our own head, the worry, the stress that comes with it. Is this going to work? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? And then you get to this point where, wow, this is providing me an abundance of
Right.
something I never had before. It's truly incredible.
It's really important too. Like there are groups like EO, for example, and owner groups. And early on, when my wife said to me, so why are you a member of these groups? Like there were a couple of groups. And I said, that adage, you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with. And she goes, yeah. I said, that's why. And she looked at me and she goes, man, are you bringing that average down? Uh, Talk about humbling a guy out. I mean, seriously. But the truth is, it's very, very difficult to talk to your spouse, if you will, about HR things because they're like, whatever, I don't know, I don't care what. It's just you can complain, but I can't relate. or talk to your employees about employee issues, right? You need to talk to somebody who is of similar mindset. And that's where it helps. They all have similar issues and we all go through similar things that we can relate to and have experience shares.
Absolutely. I love that. I just want to keep this episode going on forever. But one important piece is I want to highlight what you're passionate about right now, your passion project. It's the TV series from the recently published book, The Reincarnation of Marie. Tell us all about that. We want to highlight this as well within your journey.
Sure. So more than 40 years ago, when I left college and I went to LA and I thought, oh, I wanted to get into the film and television business as a movie producer, director, right? That didn't happen. Right? Eventually, I ran across a book that my father wrote as a manuscript, and it was amazing. So I bought the rights to the book, The Reincarnation of Marie. And I thought to myself, wait a second, how nepotistic. It's my dad. I think this is good. Guy who I knew was producing a movie. I called him up. I said, will you read this? Because I just want your opinion. He said, Henry, I'm in the middle of this movie. Give me some time. I said, don't worry. You got plenty of time. 3 days later, he calls me up because I loved it. I cannot believe this is amazing. We are meant to do this. Well, anyway, the industry chewed him up. I ended up going to Latin America to produce game shows. Then I did the tech company. And eventually I said, listen, Doug, one of these days, we're going to do this book into a movie. Now, the world has changed. 40 years ago, there were a handful of studios that controlled everything from production to distribution. Now, it's no longer a movie, it's a series. The book is based on a actual woman, Marie Berchterseff, who wrote a journal between 14 and 24. She died at 24 at tuberculosis. Her mom publishes the book 2 years later, and it becomes an international bestseller. 70 years later, guy picks up the book, reads it, and slowly finds himself falling in love with the author. And she says, I will find you in time. She's talking about reincarnation and love beyond the grave and shit like that. And he feels like she's writing to him. And then he realizes this is not right. I have fallen in love with a dead woman. This can't happen, right? Eventually, he believes he finds her reincarnation, thus the reincarnation of Marie. And so that's the premise of the book that we just published. The concept goes into the TV series called, the working title is called Slippin', which is like slipping through time, whether it's reincarnation or time travel or metaverse or something. And the idea is we explore the relationship of Marie's world and her friends and family in that time, the late 1800s, with the protagonist who's now in the 1970s, and how those lives interact, right? The sins of the father, the karma, do you meet your soulmate in every life? Do soulmates exist? I mean, is love and hate the same side of the same side of the coin? And does that exist? Do we have to work out karma? We explore all these topics in the series, and it's a much deeper dive into those questions like, what's it all about? Why are we here? Do we have soulmates? Is there such a thing as time travel or metaverse and shit like that? So it's very spooky and paranormal.
I love that. That is going to be a hit. If the book was that good, and if what you're describing, if it's only half as good, this is going to be an absolute hit series. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, listen, I talked to some producers. They love the idea. And they go, man, you did it right. Because producing stuff generally is a beginning, middle, and an end, as I mentioned. And so then you got to sell another one to make some more money. Very few actually work at a production companies where they have ongoing paychecks, right? So they go, man, you did it right. You built and sold a tech company, and now you've got this FU money where you can take your time and do it right. But the challenge with Hollywood is the world is changing as well. Not just that the productions have gone down by 40% over last year because there was an arms race, but also the scary part is what's happening with AI. How is that going to displace not just writers, but actors and backgrounds and set people? And like, a couple of years from now, it's going to seem more normal than it seems now, right? And that's the scary part. The opportunity, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be a huge opportunity, but it is going to displace and disrupt quite a few jobs and industries out there. Something important you mentioned is the span of time. Like, for example, 40 years ago, the opportunities that we had to make money are different than they are now. And I'm bringing this full circle into the content creation because now anybody with a phone are content creators. They're creating comedy, sketches, small TV series. And it almost seems as although the community, the people at large are accepting of the lower production standards and the more, I guess, just homegrown efforts. But now like the opportunity is changing as well. And I think the same
Oh,
with
without a
AI as
doubt.
well.
Without a doubt. I mean, now you've got TikTok and Instagram, which have these short things, and even production companies that are starting to look at reality-based type TikTok shows. Now, it all depends on, like, I'm old school. I like to sit down and watch TV series. And now some of the streamers are like, okay, yeah, but we kind of need to dumb it down a bit because people are spending half their time looking down at the phone, or they're washing the clothes or making the bed or doing dinner. I'm like, oh man, you pay attention because there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that are being laid out that are all going to come together in the end. But if you miss a couple of things, you're like, wait, what? Huh? What? So it's challenging to try to square that peg, right? And I look at it and say, there's still a need for that really cool, twisty, turny series, which takes you on a journey. But there's also the short, quick, entertaining snippets you'll see on an Instagram or a TikTok or a reel. And there's something for everyone now. And the attention spans have gotten much shorter.
Yep, we're seeing that with video and also with songs and music. No longer are songs 3.5 minutes long. They used to be 4.5, 5 minutes. Now they're becoming 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes even, or we're finding these 30 to 60-second snippets that this is the entire song and becomes a hit and it's well shared. And this is what content is kind of changing. People no longer have the attention spans to sit through a full
Yeah.
movie. And like you said, they can't follow through a series unless it's dumbed down for them. It's like we either need to grab their attention with more complexity and interest and details right away, or just have two stories. You have the complex one and the dumb one that just kind of follow in tandem. So that way the
Yeah.
people who like complex can enjoy, and then the dumb ones can just keep it in the background for themselves.
Yeah. Or the reiterate process or that scene, so that not the scene reiterated, but the idea. I mean, listen, I'm also a victim of this, as is my wife. We'll sit down, we'll watch TV, and every now and then the phone beeps or something. We look down and then what I miss? Oh my God, we got to rewind. Right. So
Yes.
it's a different world now. You're right.
Yes, absolutely. And I did want to touch more onto the topic of AI because changing rapidly. It is moving along at a rapid pace, and it's being introduced into almost every app or software that is available in some way or fashion. AI itself doesn't create; it imitates and replicates previous work. And if there's no human input put into it, what you get out of it just isn't the same, and then there's copyright issues or concerns. And now it creates video, it creates images, it creates songs. What we were told the automation would take away a lot of like the hard labor, the mundane tasks. Instead, AI is taking all the fun, creative arts and creativity from us, like the songs and the music and the poetry. And this is just a crazy time to be alive with the development of AI. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny because there are multiple schools of this. Listen, almost everything you watch is a ripoff of something else or a modification of this idea. I mean, there are very few original ideas, as the hero's journey is a very simplistic one that's been since Greek times, if you will, right? Or Roman time or whatever. It's been a long time. So when AI looks at the history of it, they have a far deeper, depth of stuff that they've covered than we have, and they can incorporate that stuff. So even though I say, listen, I got this great idea, it's a guy, and it is a very unique concept. Guy falls in love with a woman through her journal from 100 years earlier. What? Okay, that's cool. Finds her soulmate. Wow. Okay. So even though that book was written before even AI was the consideration in anybody's mind, the fact of the matter is now people are writing books with AI. People are creating series with AI. It would not surprise me at all that it is slowly becoming more and more accepted. Lionsgate recently said they will be using AI in certain things. If it's less expensive to create, whether it's backgrounds or entire scenes with AI, they're going to do it. It makes economic sense. Why is it that we're producing stuff in other countries and buying things from other countries? Because it's cheaper, right? And so if that's the case, and AI, listen, it take an entire day of production, paying for the production staff and the actors and the location. It takes final product 2 minutes after a day of shooting. And if AI can do an entire film in a matter of days, hello, fraction of the cost. This sadly is where some of this might be going. Now, certain things like I just got a haircut today and I said, that's something that is probably not going to be replaced by AI anytime soon, right? My daughter, an aerialist, she's a performer. That's not going to be replaced by AI anytime soon, unless you want to see a robot doing straps, right? But there are a lot of things that AI is going to disrupt without a doubt. I think entertainment is a challenge.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how much better it gets. And I think even that transition from like the 90s, 2000s, where modern effects were more practical and economical, and then CGI, which is way too expensive, and the capabilities just weren't there. And sometimes some movie would add it in just to say they added it or try it out. But I mean, just the evolution of even Toy Story to see
Oh,
what was
yeah.
great at that time and the evolution of it. It's crazy to see modern to CGI and then
Yeah.
now AI. I think people are going to kind of have a keen sense for what is AI or isn't, just in the same way as they notice CGI a bit more or less.
Shortly, because as now it's relatively young. I mean, we're in the infancy of the AI revolution with text to video, right? But we watch animated stuff like you mentioned, Toy Story, and it pulls at the heartstrings. We buy into it. We get into it emotionally. So move forward and say, listen, I want an actor that's a cross between Chris and Henry. And there's a good looking guy, right? All of a sudden, he looks like us. He has emotions, probably better actor than we are. And the background looks perfect because you can say, listen, he's in Paris in the late 1800s. It's got pictures, it'll recreate it. Now, all of a sudden, you're creating truisms that feel good. And just like movies are meant to take you away, you're taken with this and it's going to get better. We're really, really, really early into this. It's going to get better.
Absolutely. Henry, I'm so thankful for you coming on and sharing all this tip, experience, and wisdom with us and our listeners. Really great conversation. I hope we can maybe have you on for a part 2 and 3 sometime in the future because we love the topics of discussion and your experience as well.
Anytime. And if anybody wants to get a hold or know more, go to mariethestory.com. It has information on the book, the series, and then how to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Would you like any other links or areas for people to connect with you as well, or just the one is perfect?
Yeah, Marie the Story has my LinkedIn and my Facebook and my Instagram. So that's pretty much where my life is these days. So yeah, and the
Perfect.
book.
Excellent. And we'll have links available down in the description and show notes for everyone to get connected with Henry Woodman here. MarieTheStory.com will have that available down. Henry, again, thank you so much. Appreciate the amazing conversation. You're a great human being. Keep up the great work out there. Congratulations on your past success, man. Excited for everything in the future for you.
Thanks, Trish. Appreciate it. I hope that helped.
Hey, absolutely. Thanks so much. Have a good one.